Hey everybody, headphones on. So what that means is I've got another guest coming today. We were at Warhammer World. We were playing in their latest big event. We had 30 players come, a couple dropped out. So overall we had 27 players, which I think makes it one of the largest Warcry events that we've had this year, which is really good. So I've invited Charles on once again. Say hello, Charles.
Hi there.
Hello, hello. And yeah, we are going to go through the event. We are going to talk about some of the lists. We're going to talk about the top 8. We're going to talk about the standings. We're going to talk about everything. And yeah, we're going to have a good time while we do it, I hope. But before we get into that, if you want to pass on some support over to me, you can join me here on YouTube. You can join me on Patreon if you want to see some stuff, what's coming in the future, or maybe if you want to say as to the kind of videos that I do next. Might be interesting for you. Alternatively, I've got my Streamlabs account, or if you don't want to do that, you can just hit a like and give me a subscribe. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it helps me get around the YouTube algorithm and yeah, get my videos out to more people, which, you know what, for me it's pretty good. For you guys, I'm sure it's good also. But without further ado, let's get going into the event, the Tangled Gnarlwood. Right, so Tangled Gnarlwood, it was 4 games of Warcry. The mission pack that we were playing was a mix of the rulebook match play missions and the 3 White Dwarf missions that they released in White Dwarf number 490. They were using Divine Blessings, also those rules you can find in White Dwarf 490. If you're interested in any of those, I will put the links down in the description below to my video to that, where I explain all about the missions, how they work, how you want to use Divine Blessings, that kind of thing. So yeah, so these were the missions that we used. Number 1, Hidden Vault. We've talked about that a lot of times. Fairly standard. It's in the main rulebook. But the interesting missions here, of course, are the White Dwarf missions, how they played and how people tried to build for those missions. So the second mission was Cursed Prize. Cursed Prize is kind of like Cursed Relic, where you pick up the treasure in the middle of the battlefield and it starts doing damage to you. But it's more lethal than the Cursed Relic is. You pick up the treasure does curse damage to you every turn, and curse damage is essentially half of your wound pool. If you're holding the treasure, it will do that much damage to anyone around you, and it also gives you an ability to do curse damage to other things and absorb their life. So the lethality has gone up massively. It's not just d6 wounds or anything. The idea is that if you have a guy with a large enough wound pool, he can go pick up the treasure, he can pulse for a bunch of damage to a bunch of people around him, he can run away, and he can do life leech curse to absorb the wounds of someone else to try and keep alive for the end of the game.
One of the interesting things, though, is it's the damage from the Cursed Relic happens at the beginning of the round, so even before you've done initiative, you'll take the damage before you even know if you're going to go first or second, is the main thing. So it's very dangerous to pick it up turn 1, because then turn 2, you take a bunch of damage before you even know if you can actually get out of there.
And also, another thing about this is that if you drop the treasure token, the relic will do curse damage to you again. So it's not even like you can go, okay, well, I'm going to drop the token, run away, come back, pick it up. You
can't avoid the damage.
We're going to talk about the lists in a little bit, but I brought Wildercorp Hunters to this event, and my Cursed Prize opponent was Soulblight Gravelords, and we kind of knew that if we were going to be taking the damage, any little hit would basically kill us. So me and my opponent kind of spent the game dancing around the relic, and then we leapt onto it on the last turn, and then it was basically last man standing wins. But I guess my experience of Cursed Prize is very different from yours, Charles, because you're playing a very different kind of list.
Yeah, so you're using Gorges. Out of the 6 models, only 4 of them could actually pick up the relic without having to use an ability.
Yeah.
So I ended up sending my claw back in on round 2 to pick it up. He lost a few wounds before he even took damage from the relic, and suddenly he was on 14 wounds on turn 3. Going from 35 to 14 in the space of a round is not a fun thing.
Yeah, through not even anything happening to you, just by picking up the treasure.
Suddenly, turn 3 starts, relic does halved. 14 damage to me. And I'm like, oh, that's a little bit spicy. I still had some big wound characters to be able to pick it up. I didn't rush for it turn 1, even though I could, because that's an extra turn of damage that If I had, I wouldn't have survived.
One of the main criticisms of Curse Prize, I've played a bunch of test games with this, and one of the main problems that the community seems to have with it is that if you build in a certain way, so let's say you've got a big guy list where you've got one or two really big, powerful guys like Varangard or Ogre Tyrants or whatever, supported by a bunch of little guys, it's very similar to the original Curse Relic in that whoever gets the relic first will essentially win the game. And from the people that I've spoken to at the event, it seems to be kind of the same thing. You get the relic first with a big dude, you run away, you use Life Leech Curse to keep his wounds up, you kind of turtle up behind the rest of your warband, and you win that way. So I don't think the increased lethality to the holder of the relic in this case really does all that much to counteract the downsides of the original Curse Relic mission in terms of mechanically how it plays.
I feel it does. Oh, it does a lot more than it used to. It makes it almost too lethal for low wound character, like any of the low wound warbands. It makes it more lethal because it's a flat damage number, which is half your health. So again, having more wounds is always better, but I think it's more lethal to the low wound ones. It evens up a bit more versus the high wound models, but they can still shrug off a turn or two of curse damage and still survive.
So I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. The White Dwarf missions very much favor big smashy guys, like big, super tough, super damaging guys.
Elite teams
elite teams, exactly. And what elite teams have is they'll have a whole bunch of wounds, they'll have a whole bunch of toughness, which makes them very difficult to kill, and they'll generally have a lot of damage, so you don't want to be running into a tyrant, for example. A tyrant that runs in and gets the Curse Prize, if you do a move attack action into the tyrant, even after he's had his wounds cut in half, he'll survive that, and then he'll smash you back and you will die from it. So that's really what these missions kind of favor. And one of the things I found with these White Dwarf missions is that if you have two balanced warbands going up against each other, and when I say balanced, I mean warbands of a similar archetype. So, for example, two elite warbands going up against each other, it's absolutely fine. Two kind of mid-rangey warbands going up against each other, it's kind of fine because no one has any real advantage in that case. Similarly, two swarm warbands going up against each other, they both have the same problems with these missions, and they're fine. I think the main problem is that when you have a mismatch of archetypes, now you have that in any mission where different missions could favor different things. So if you're playing an objective mission, for example, with 5 objectives, of course that's going to favor Swarm. But I feel like in the White Dwarf missions especially, those differences are kind of escalated and they're amplified just how the missions work. And we'll see that here. We're going to look at Mission 3, Brutal Conquest. Effectively what happens is the first time one of your fighters kills a guy, he becomes a great champion, and you keep a tally of the wounds inflicted by your great champion throughout the game. And then whoever at the end of the game has their great champion on the battlefield has a higher tally, that person will win, and anything else is a draw. Brutal Conquest, just like the previous mission, really favors big smashy guys to go in who can just do a whole bunch of wounds, one-shot chaff fighters, one-shot characters, and kind of live to tell the tale to really rack up their tally. Charles, I know you had a decent time in Brutal Conquest, as far as I remember.
Actually, what was bad was I went in with the clawback first into a Stormcast guy with a mace, took him down to 2 wounds, then killed him with another attack on 2 wounds. So I actually only got a tally of 2.
2 points, yeah.
But it's one of those ones of once I'd got the tally on my big guy, suddenly, okay, everything else he does, which is going to always be a lot of damage, it just racks up the tally fast. In this one, I was against Demetrius' Stormcast. He untunneled vision on Hrothgar, brought him down to 4 wounds, and then killed him on 4 wounds. So his champion only got 4.
Yeah.
And then his champion was actually kind of on the wrong side of the board at that point. So it's one of those ones where it's having your champion in the right place, but also not in too much danger is a massive thing. So it's an interesting one. And I think you can talk about the tally doesn't actually disappear or reset when you lose your grand champion.
Yes.
Which is why I had to go up and get it clarified. It was going into round 4 and I'd actually lost my champion, but I had like a tally of 22. Demetrius's 4 or 6 he was on. If my tally resets, I've probably lost even if I get a new champion. But if the tally doesn't reset, then all I have to do is get a champion and I win the game because I have a
Exactly,
tally
yeah.
advantage.
So this happened to me, right? So I had my Arbalista who was on like 18 points. Arbalista died. Now, the way I read it, I mean, I read through it a couple of times, but the way I read it, and my opponent read it actually, was that, okay, well, your champion dies. As soon as another guy kills a guy, he becomes your champion and you start your tally. Now, we read it the other way, that your tally belongs to that particular champion, and when he dies, you lose it. So this happened, I think, end of turn 2, beginning of turn 3. My Arbalista died, and I thought, okay, well, my opponent's champion only has 6 wounds. And I thought, right, well, the only way I can win this game now is if I kill his champion and then win on 1 or 2 points. Because his champion will be dead, he won't be able to get any points. Whereas I could have focused down any of the other really wounded guys, which would have been really easy to do, and I would have got all my points back. Now, I didn't know that the mission worked the way you're describing it, Charles, so I effectively lost this mission because of that. And now for me, it's not a big deal. I didn't find out until after all the points were handed in and whatever. So I wasn't about to go back and say, oh, I actually won this mission, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've put in a request to the Warhammer World guys to clarify this, and actually changes my view of the mission quite a bit. Because even though it is really useful to have a big killy guy that will go around getting a lot of points, the fact that your tally carries over means that you can go hunting enemy chaff models that are way easier to kill. And
If
even
your
if
enemy has chaff.
if they have chaff, sure. But if they're on like a standard big guy, small guy build, you can go fighting them instead. And even if your hero dies, your tally will carry over. So it's a bit of an equalizer. Yeah. The dynamics of this mission are actually a bit weird because you only want your champion to kill things and to do damage.
Yes,
But you can't afford just to let your opponent's warband walk around and do stuff. And you get no points for anyone else dying. As long as it's not the champion doing the damage.
There is also a secondary part to this that if you have a grand champion on the field, at the end of the round, any enemy fighters within 4 inches of the edge are instantly taken down.
Yeah.
So you do also have to be very careful that you make sure you get away from the edge of the board in round 2 when your reserve comes on. Otherwise, there's a chance that you leave somebody just in range of the edge and they have a champion. Suddenly, the champion earns a bunch of free points.
There is a caveat to that it doesn't affect other grand champions. So if you wanted to, you could run away.
Yeah, you could have your grand champion hide at the edge of the board. Yeah. Anyone who comes to fight him, if they don't kill him, they die.
And then he gets more points. So it's a bit weird in that case. But yeah, I think of the 2 White Dwarf missions we played, I preferred Brutal Conquest, especially now that I know how it works properly. If you're going to be playing one of those, I think Brutal Conquest is the one to go. And again, if you can get kind of balanced archetypes playing against each other, you can get really good games out of it. I don't think either of us played imbalanced archetypes, because Charles, you played against 6-man Stormcast.
Yeah.
And I played against the New Cities of Sigmar, so we were all around about 9 models-ish, human-ish kind of guys. So yeah, we were very evenly matched, I think, in that view. Game 4 was ley lines. We've talked about ley lines a lot. It's a objective mission. Objectives come on board and you get points for it. Right, so let's go into participants. A lot of ones here that we can see.
But a lot of different warbands.
A lot of different warbands, yeah.
Better than a lot of people playing the same warband.
For sure. There's 4 Soulblight Gravelords simply because they are very popular. As a faction, they're popular. Different
Lists, though, as well, was the thing.
Yeah, there was a bunch of Cursed City in there. There was a bunch of King Morlach in there just because you get everything in one box, and it's kind of nice. But yeah, I mean, they're popular, so people are going to play them. Another one, we had Cruel Boys. We had a couple of Cruel Boys players playing, but considering we had, 27 participants at this rate, it's not a statistical, it's a massive thing for statistics. But yeah, like you said, everyone else is playing a different warband. And I prefer that. I think that's real good, and that's kind of what you want out of a tournament, because especially if you don't get to play all that much, you want to go to a place, you want to play your 4 games, and play against 4 completely different opponents that you hadn't actually played before. So I think that's kind of my preferred way to play, instead of you see some events and it's like, oh yeah, 20%, 30% of the field are basically the same list because that's the best list that you're going to bring. I wouldn't say that this event was casual. I think the overall player quality was actually really high, especially when you look at the top 8, how those players did and the kind of warbands that they did it with. We have some very good players here, but I think unlike maybe the US and some other areas of the world, you get a lot more people taking warbands because they like the faction and they like the warband, and they'll try and do the best that they can in that warband, as opposed to just taking whatever the best list is. So I kind of like that about the meta that we have in the UK. Looking at the average tournament points, so this is how everyone did. For the most part, there was one entrant per faction, so it doesn't really tell you all that much there, apart from Soulblight Gravelords. They didn't do fantastic, the Soulblight Gravelords players this time around. That's probably down to the mission pack that we were playing. Like we said, it heavily favors elites for three of the missions, in fact, heavily favors elites. But that being said, you need here the 45 points for 3 and 1. So 3 minor wins and a major loss. Or, I mean, you could also do it with 2 major wins and 1 minor loss, but no one actually managed to get that. So anyone above the red line got 3 and 1, and effectively, any one of them, if they had a little bit of luck either way or the other, maybe the dice, maybe on something else, they could have won the event. This is the top 8 standings. We have in first place Demetrios with his Stormcast Eternals. Charles, you played him in game 3, or was it game 4?
It was game 3.
Game 3, yes. Because, he had the Stormcast with the hammers that were smashing you about.
Yeah. And it came down to not rolling a 5+ on essentially 7 dice, but it was a very, very good game.
Yeah. And then you can see there from 2 down to 8, it's all 3 wins, 1 loss. Interesting that Demetrios didn't get any of his tournament quests. So anyone else with the same score would have beat him if they managed to get 1 of the 4 tournament quests that they would have got. It's an extra point per quest that you complete. Looking at the kill points, the big standouts here are Tobias with his Horns of Hashut. He got over 3,000 kill points. Kill points in this instance is the points worth of stuff that you killed during the event.
You can see on Tobias' score that in his game 2 and game 3 he maxed, and games 2 he got 995, which I'm assuming was the entire warband.
Probably. Most probably, yeah.
Round 2 was Cuss Relic, and round 3 was Brutal Conquest. So kind of kill-focused missions.
You do much more damage on. And then also Josh with his Iron Golems, which I believe also you played.
Yeah, I played him in the final round, yeah.
Yes, and his ogres were better than your ogres.
Oh, they punched hard, yeah.
They did punch hard, yeah. He got 3,155 points. His points were mainly weighted into game 4, which was the objective missions. So maybe him and his opponent were really fighting around objectives and he had to knock out things. Because he basically almost tabled his opponent. Looking at the lists here. So we're going to start with Demetrios. He's playing Stormcast. He's got the Protector Prime. He's got Errant Questors that he brought in. We got the Questor with Grand Spear. Nice thing about the Errant Questors is that they have the action cheating, so they've got additional moves. When they die, they can make friendly fighters attack, that kind of thing. So I'm pretty sure that's why the Grand Spear was there. He's also got he's also got the Soulsworn Knight Relictor, again from the Errant Questors with the teleport on quads.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Did it work for him?
Yeah, it did. Well, that's how he got to the health score, and he just teleported across the board. And I'm like, oh dear, he's over there now.
I've got my quad. Here I go.
Yeah, I hadn't actually really looked at Stormcast that much, and suddenly it's like, oh, that's a quad ability for Stormcast. Oh, okay.
Yes, well, specifically for
the Knight Relictor, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then he's got a trio of paladins with Star Soul maces. They're pretty good. 155 points for toughness 6, 3 attacks at strength 5, 4/8 damage. It's a lot.
They really, really hurt, and he was rolling hot.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to walk into paladins because even though they have 20 wounds, that toughness 6 is going to keep them around for at least 1 round of combat or 2, and when they start hitting you back.
That's what I had the hardest time with, was just pretty much, apart from I think it's just the Knight Relictor, everyone else is toughness 6.
Oh yeah, sure.
You're wounding them on 5s.
Yeah.
Because you're doing like 2 or 3 wounds at a time. They just walk through you.
Sure. The Protector Prime is an interesting choice, I think. 195, it's got 25 wounds. It does have toughness 6.
Yeah.
But it's got 3-inch range, which is pretty good for a Stormcast.
Yeah, it's same with the Grand Spear. You can have them behind a guy with a mace, and the guy with the mace is just tanking in the way, and the spear's just stabbing through.
Yeah, and it's not even a little bit behind. 3 inches is a long way. It just needs to walk up to a thing. So it gives it, let's see, so the Protector with Grand Spear it's got movement 3, but it effectively has a 6-inch threat radius, which is actually pretty good. So I think that's pretty interesting. 6 fighters, but you know what? Stormcast, they're pretty good for this particular pack. They're all fairly tough. They've got a bunch of wounds. They've got a bunch of damage, in this case, with the Paladins. So I can see how he did well.
It was mostly, as well, about the tournament question, it was mostly it's the way he had to play, because you have to kind of turtle up with them to make the most of the action cheating and the toughness.
And the range on those spears.
That just means you can't do the quarters one, because you've only got 6 models.
Can't do high ground.
3 of them, you can't do it. High ground is risky to send somebody because they're also slow. The killing the leader one is okay. Blunt is okay unless you're against somebody who can really hurt you.
Sure, but again, I don't even think killing the leader is all that viable in this, because because you're slow, your opponent's leader effectively has to walk up to Paladins.
They do, but it depends on what they're doing. If it's if they're having to send them in because they want to get the treasure because of their highest wound character, they kind of have to put themselves in threat range. Plus, when you can just teleport a guy across the board, nobody's really safe.
I can see how Dimitrios did well with this list, especially within the confines of this pack. He's a really good player. He's my only loss from Warhammer Fest, so it's good to see that he's keeping up with things. Second place, we've got Sam. Now, the interesting thing about Sam's list is that it is 1 box Quest of Soulsworn. Just one of each thing. So 1 sword, 1 axe, 1 blades, 1 hammer, the Relictor, and the Quest of Prime. Very much like Dimitrios' list. It's got the action cheating, it's got the teleport. So again, I can see how it did fairly well in the confines of this mission pack. I don't know who he played against.
But again, it favors elites. They're all high toughness. They've all got a decent wound pool.
In other mission packs, it wouldn't do all that well, and the community likes to bash Quest of Soulsworn for having all of this action economy and all of this stuff, but not being all that good.
It doesn't matter when you're outnumbered 2-1 on objectives and you can't score an objective.
Yeah, and it's like, when there's only 1 objective to catch, or only 1 piece of treasure to get, or you just need to kill things, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so good on you, Sam. Third place, Tobias. Okay, he was playing Horns of Hashut. It's actually a fairly standard Horns list. So we've got the Ruinator Alpha with Heavy Flail. He had some points left over, so we gave it Swiftness for +1 move, so it's moving at movement 5, which is nice. 2 Flame Hurlers, very good. They've got that triple, which does a whole bunch of damage. They're one of the best things in the list. 5 Shatterers. Shatterers are fantastic chaff units. They got 10 wounds, which is really good for their points cost. They are one of the most efficient chaff units in the game, actually, because of that, which is real good. And he's got a Fomoroid Crusher with Ferocity for +1 attack. It's just an all-round decent list. It's very solid. It can do, because it's got the numbers, it can do objective missions. Because it's got things like the Fomoroid and the Demolishers with Flame Hurlers, it can do kill missions as well. So yeah, it's just an all-round solid list. And this is probably one of the best examples in this event of what I would call, I don't want to call it a meta list, because there was only 1 Horns of Hashut player, so that's just the way it is.
It's a take-all-comers list, really. It can do...
Yes. But it's using the best things in Horns of Hashut and using them to good effect. We can see that. He came 3rd place, Tobias, and we know exactly how he did it and why he did that. The 4th place, this guy right here, it's me with World of Corpse Hunters. This is a list that I've been messing around with. I'd actually only played maybe 3 test games with it. I've been playing a bit on Tabletop Simulator. So this is the most up-to-date version of my Hunters that I have. I've got some ideas going forward how I might improve it, but to be honest, it's real good. You got the Warden with the Trailhound, you got 2 Trailhounds, 4 Trailblazers with Twin Crossbows, an Arbalester with the Blessing of Might to give it +1 strength, so it becomes strength 5, and Kalthir Zandire. It's really good. Wild Corpse Hunters, I really enjoy them. They play very much like Hunters of Huanchi, but with a lot less of the headache that Hunters have, in that you're trying to run around and do all of these different things with a lack of damage. Whereas Wilder Corps, they're slower, but they're slightly more survivable, and they've got damage. Once you put the Arbalista into the mix and the Trailblazers with crossbows with 4 shots apiece when they shoot, suddenly they are able to do a surprising amount of damage at range. I chose Calthea Zandire here. I've been messing around between Zandire and a Fight for Profit hero. I think Fight for Profit works with Hunters of Huanchi, and Calthea works best with the Wilder Corps Hunters. The reason being that even on an average triple for Calthea, she can affect 2 other guys, and so that's going to be the Arbalista to get him to be able to shoot an additional time, and a Trailblazer. The Trailblazers themselves have a double where they can get other friendly fighters around them to fight, and you're almost cheating in a bunch of extra action economy, a bunch of extra damage with your Arbalista, more extra damage with your crossbows, and then if you need to get somewhere, you can always use Calthea to move your pieces around the board. It did very well. Like I said, I would have probably won game 3 if we played the mission properly, and that would have put me on 4 wins for the event. So it would have been pretty good. If you want to check out my Wilder Corps Hunters video where I do talk about this build, I'll put the links down in the description below, and you can see how I like to play it, which fighters to bring, and how to go. Moving onwards, we have 5th place, Matthew Martell. Now, he was using the new Cities of Sigmar. He's the guy who I actually played in game 3. I didn't know this, or I didn't realize this at the time, but this list is actually illegal as per the new Cities of Sigmar, because you can't mix humans, elves, and dwarves anymore. So you're not allowed to bring the Executioner, and you're not allowed to bring the Blackguard in a Cities of Sigmar list. That being said, the Executioner and Blackguard, they didn't do all that much in my game. I don't know how they did in the other games. He had the Arc Knight with Fortitude for extra wounds. He had the Sergeant at Arms also with Fortitude for extra wounds. The Cavalier at 165 just as a mobile damaging piece. Great Herald is the guy with the big banner. Battle Mage, 120 points, does what Battle Mages do. They've got a ranged fireball magic missile style attack and a bunch of abilities, and then just a bunch of chaff units. He was using the Arc Knight as his general. It's pretty straightforward, the Arc Knight. It's got a bunch of damage to him. He's 3-5-2-4, which is absolutely fine. He was using Fortitude to give it 19 wounds. He had the Castellite Wall reaction, which effectively gives +1 toughness to his guys, and if the other friendly fighter that then has the elite remark, it does damage back. But generally speaking, he just had a whole bunch of just value troops, really. It's just an all-round solid list. I don't think it has been finely tuned. My opponent said it was just a bunch of stuff that he had that he wanted to use, and he was using proxies for a whole bunch of things from his old Cities of Sigmar list. But yeah, like I said, I played him in game 3. Otherwise, it was a very good game. I quite enjoyed playing against just a standard human army. I think it was a nice change from playing against things with like a lot of wounds or a lot of toughness or massive amounts of damage. I think Cities of Sigmar humans, they're kind of going to be a middle of the pack warband from what I've seen. But if you build them well and you get those reps in and you play them, I think they could be they could be fairly decent. Charles, you did something.
Yeah, we took the Gorgers from Hunter and Hunted, put another ogre in there in the form of Hothgorn just for his stupidly good crossbow shots. Yeah, his strength 6, 4-8 damage crossbow is not to be trifled with. And yeah, Quiv and Bushwhacker in there. Quiv to give Hrothgorn the chance at extra shots, and Savagery on the Gorgers, making them 3-6 damage, the same as the Clawback, which actually was that extra 1 crit damage was actually really useful in all of my games, because I played Search Demons round 1, and they had quite a few models with a lot of wounds. So just the extra crit damage helped. Played Soulblight Overlords and Gravelords in round 2. Didn't help as much, but still, when you only need to say get one crit and 2 hits on your attack, on your 4 attacks,
crit and a hit will kill a skeleton. So
yeah, and that's the other thing. Clawback is just really solid. I didn't have to use the lose the beast rune mark double at any point, which was lucky. If we'd been playing any of the other missions that had like the multiple treasures or things like that, it would have had to play a lot different. I would have had to have been saving my doubles for that rather than using the Gorger double of if there's an enemy within 6, you can make a free move towards them, which I got a lot of use out of that, including having a Gorger move twice around a piece of terrain to get within 6 inches of an opponent on an objective to then run towards him.
Huh.
But yeah, they're really solid. The toughness 3 does offset their 30 and 35 wounds, but I was facing, with the one that did the most damage being the Iron Golems and the Stormcast. When you're getting hit by strength 5 and 6, it doesn't really matter that you've got toughness 3 or if you have toughness 4, they still wound you on 3s.
Yeah, this is what we were talking about, right? It's anything that is going to be able to chew those 30 wounds is going to be at strength 5.
It's going to do anyway, yeah.
So you could be toughness 4 and it wouldn't matter. You'd be being wounded on the same thing.
Generally, anybody who's strength 4 is only generally like a 1-3 or a 1-4 profile, maybe a 2-4.
Yeah, it'll be a 2-4.
And they're not going to chew through your 30 wounds that fast. It is like the guys who've got strength 5 or strength 6 with like a 3-5, 3-6, or
4-8 or something.
Yeah, suddenly, that was the thing, is Stormcast ran up and just went, 2 crits, 2 hits, and half of Hrothgorn's health disappeared in a swing. But if I'd been playing against any other light damage list, you can just shrug it off for a couple of turns and not even be that worried, because your return strikes will kill them. It's a fun list. Again, the first 3 rounds really played to the small model count strength. I got lucky in the first game where I got to choose where the final objective was, essentially, so I could dictate the flow of that battle. Second game, I managed to just live. Just having the extra wounds helped me. Third round was the loss, but it was incredibly close. And then again, fourth round, that damage output is what really helped in that one.
Yes.
But yeah, the Gorges are good and they're fun.
Yeah, are the Gorges... So we've got another event coming up in February. Is this the kind of list you would want to take to that also? Or was it like... Because you played a bunch of different stuff by now.
Yeah, well, I've played mostly smaller elite teams, apart from the Beastmen, who are a little bit of a bigger team, but I have that elite damage.
Yes.
Again, more models would be nice, especially if we have more objective-based missions. But the killing power, if your opponent doesn't have any models, they can't exactly hold objectives.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a Gorger can one hit an 8 to 10 wound chaff generally.
Yeah.
Once you start getting above 10 wounds, that's where it starts getting a bit iffy, them getting a 1 attack kill.
Sure.
But they're not, most of those things aren't then going to kill you back, and then next turn you're just going to eat them, especially if you're throwing your Gorger at an objective. So it's one of those ones of, it's all positioning with them is the thing. But yeah, I'll probably take them again in February. I don't think there's much you can really do just because of the costs of the models in terms of adding or removing things from the list. And 6 is really as small a model count as you want to go in Warcry.
And again, if anyone wants to see more about the Gorges and this list in particular, I will put the link down in the comments for my Gorger video, where I go through, again, the whole warband, the things that you want to choose. I go through a whole bunch of different ally options for the Gorges. Hrothgorn was kind of the one that I settled on for this, and I think it's pretty good. I think Hrothgorn, he covers one of the main issues of the list in that until your Gorges get into a fight, they're a bunch of expensive dudes not doing anything. But Hrothgorn has that range projection where he can start plinking guys from turn 1, and with the 4-8 damage profile on his bow, he can reasonably be expected to knock out 1 or even maybe 2 chaff units on turn 1, which helps bring down that activation advantage for the later turns. And I think that's kind of why he works real good with the Gorges specifically. I mean, he's a very good fighter. Other warbands have used him to good success. But yeah, with the Gorges, I think Hrothgorn might be the way to go for them. Moving on, we got 2 more lists here. Josh Upton was playing Iron Golems. We've got the Dominar with Savagery for +1 crit, Legionary with Bolus, Drill Master, Ogre Breacher, Signifier, and a Fomeroid. Fomeroids were probably the most common kind of big ally kind of thing that people brought in, and you can see why. They've got the damage, they've got the toughness, they've got the speed, they got that pretty cool throw rocks attack, and you can see how a list with only 6 fighters managed to do pretty well in this mission pack. It's got 3 really big damaging threats in the Dominar, the Breacher, and the Crusher. It's got 2 extremely tough units in the Breacher and the Crusher itself. When you're only going up for 1 objective or 1 piece of treasure, or you need to kill things, you can really afford to bring a smaller elite warband with more highly damaging things. Charles, you did play this. The Breacher proved that his ogres were better than yours.
Yeah, I played Josh in round 4, and yeah, it was Gorger versus Gorger. He was against the Breacher, and I think it was just the Legionary of Bolus.
Yes,
I'd killed the Legionary of Bolus, but then the Breacher came kind of steaming in, and again, it's got, I think
it's 4/8 on the Breacher.
4/8, yeah.
It's strength 6 as well. So.
Yeah, it just came in and just kind of evaporated most of a Gorger in 1 hit, and it's like, oh, that's not fun. The Dominar and I think it was the Signifier went kind of together to 1 objective, and yeah, the Dominar again murdered a Gorger in 2 sets of attacks, because again, it's got a huge damage profile. The Crusher did actually use his throw rock ability, but he rolled a 2, so it did nothing. It could have taken out my leader if the rock had hit. Good chance it would have killed him. It's a tough list. Again, it's a very small elite list, but like you say, it's got a few strong pieces, but also very high damage output that it can do. The Drill Master did unfortunately get 1 shot by Gorger that appeared from reserves. Again, I rolled 2 crits and 2 hits, and the Drill Master evaporated. So it can suffer the same fate if you don't have, if you get hit by a high damage attack, you do also evaporate, because you have a lot of wounds, but not that many wounds.
Yeah, and in a very lethal top 8, like we're seeing, 20 wounds, they disappear real quick.
I think the Drill Master's 18, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I did the exact 18, and it just died.
Nice, just fell over.
Which put Josh a little bit on the back foot, because he was expecting to at least be able to hold that objective.
Yeah.
It's solid. It's a solid list.
And yeah, 8th place, we've got Adam. Adam is Mr. Toast from War Games on Toast. So yeah, welcome Adam to Off Meta Musings. He brought Cruel Boys with him. He had the Bolt Boy boss with the idea that it would be able to sit back, use its ability to be able to crit on 4s and kind of do damage from range. Talker, Tough Skull, and Shank. Those 2, he was bringing them specifically because that warband has access to nets, and those guys have nets, and that's generally very good, especially in a mission pack that favors smaller, more elite lists. Imagine being able to run in, net the Breacher, for example, or net a Crusher. That effectively takes it out of the game for a turn, if not 2, if you manage to get the priority next turn.
Just netting anybody on an elite team just removes that piece generally from the game for a round, and that just
exactly.
It's huge.
It's huge, yes. He's got the Brute Boss with Boss Chopper. It's a Brute, so it gets to use Yemessin. Yeah. I don't think it did anything. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have done anything in the first 3 missions. It could have been the first mission, and that would have been really funny.
Yeah,
because
again,
there's only 1 objective, get Yemessin.
Yeah, you have a single objective, it runs over, goes Yemessin on the last round, and wins the game.
Yeah, it could do that. It's a very solid choice, and we know exactly why he brought it. You've got the Clawback, one of the newer options for destruction. I think the Clawback is cheap enough and its damage output is high enough that it makes it a very attractive prospect.
It's got movement 5 as well.
Yes.
It's got that speed with
and a free
double
move ability.
It can, if needs be, go 15 inches as long as the second move takes it to within 6 of an enemy.
Yes.
So it's got some serious speed on it if it needs to, and it's 4 attacks at strength 5 with 3/6 damage. That's really good profile.
Very good, yeah. And I believe, no doubt he'll go through this separately. I believe during the game it either smushed things or was hit by stuff sufficiently hard to kind of die itself, which again, in a top 8 that's this lethal with the amount of damage that's being thrown around with like the big guys. That's understandable. And then he had 4 Gut Rippers with Wicked Stickers, just basic Gut Rippers. They're pretty good. They've got the, I mean, I say they're pretty good. They don't do any damage, but they've got the 15 wounds and they've got toughness 4. They do have the Cruel Boys reaction, where you get a little bit of zonal control in that. If any opponent fighter moves within 3 inches and they end within 3 inches, the Gut Rippers can use their reaction to get other friendly fighters to attack that fighter that's just come in. So you can use that and you can set up situations, especially around objective missions, where you've got Gut Rippers holding your objectives, being supported by your Clawback or your Brute Boss. Things go in to try and capture the objective, triggers the reaction, Clawback attacks, Brute Boss attacks, does a whole bunch of damage back with free attack activations. All round, it's just a solid all-rounder list. It's got the numbers to be able to do any number objective missions, and on top of that, it's got the damage and it's got the speed to be able to work in a mission pack like this, where you have more elite requirements. The Brute Boss, it's a beast in itself in terms of the amount of damage it can put out. The Clawback also, ton of damage it can put out, and I think it's pretty nice having the Bolt Boy boss working in a similar way to the Arbalester or to something like Hrothgorn, not in the amount of damage it can do, but for the same reasons why you would want to bring it, for that range projection and to knock out enemy chaff units to increase the activation advantage on your side. Because the best thing for you is if your opponent's out of activations and your Brute Boss and your Clawback are still able to activate. It gives them free reign of the battlefield to do whatever they want. So yeah, that was the top 8. Here we have the other 3-1 winners. This is in no particular order itself. There's some interesting stuff going on in the other 3-1s. Alexander Wilkes, he brought, again, Cruel Boys. He was the second Cruel Boys list. Again, we're going to see the Gut Rippers with stickers. We're going to see a Gut Ripper boss because it's a very cheap boss for him to take. 2 Beast Knobs from the new Cruel Boys Bespoke Warband. Beast Knobs are awesome. They got an awesome damage profile. They got 25 wounds. They got the toughness. And I think, again, as an ally, I think Destruction are the big winners from the recent set of releases. They've got the Clawback. They've got the Beast Knob. So now they kind of have, if you want a damaging ally, they have something for almost every points level that you would want. If you want a utility ally, they've got something at every points level that you would want. We've got the Brugit. We've got the Boggle if you need that. You've got all sorts of characters. You've got the Brute Boss if you want to shut down hordes on objective missions. So they basically have everything. He also had a Rockbuck Troggoth, which is nice. I always like to see the trolls come in. Not enough people use them, if you ask me. Next we had Connor. Connor's list. It is Corvus Cabal. I think it's one box Corvus Cabal because it's only got the 1 Shrike Talon. You got 2 Spire Stalkers, 2 Cabalists, 2 with Spears, 1 with Familiar. It was very good for him to be able to do what he did. Spire Stalkers in general are just a solid all-round fighter. They are a bit on the pricey side, but yeah, for this kind of list, I'm surprised that it managed to do as well as it did, which is probably a testament to Connor's abilities in piloting it, I think.
Yeah, again, it depends on the kind of matchups you have as well. It's one of those ones of there was a lot of high damage lists, and if he managed to dodge a few of those, but he's got the numbers to kind of maybe lose a guy or two and still outmaneuver them.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you can play, so the way you could play it in mission 1, the way you could play is dance around your opponents and then jump onto the objective last turn. And you're going to be outnumbering your opponent, so you can win by doing that. Mission 2, it's got the speed with the Shrike Talon and the general movement 5 guys. You can go and you can get that treasure turn 1 and kind of run away and then wall up with your Kabbalists. Just so your opponent has so much stuff that they have to get through that they can't win the game because they can't physically go and
they
get
can't
the
get
treasure.
to your guy, and your treasure guy will have probably 1 wound left at the end of the game, but 1 wound is more than you need.
Exactly, yeah. Game 3 is where a lack of damage might come in, but he does have a bit of damage with the Spire Stalkers, the Talon, and the Shadow Piercer. And then game 4 was flat out objectives where he's got so much maneuverability and speed, and the numbers, where you can go and you can tag the objectives on turn 1 and then just sit on them for the rest of the game and win that way. So we can see how he does it, but yeah, I think very good on you, Connor. I think you did very well with this list. We've got Ishak Khan. I love this list. 2 ferocity Vargulfs. So ferocity is +1 attack. So they're 4 attack Vargulfs. So suddenly they are extremely lethal. The Duke's Harriers are the Bat Swarm that you get from Duke Crackmarrow's Bladeborn Warband, which is really fun. Gives a little bit of speed in there, but Fortitude is fun. And 4 Fortitude Crypt Ghouls. So these are not 8 wound Crypt Ghouls, they are 12 wound Crypt Ghouls. I don't know if Fortitude was generally the best thing to do here. Every time you're buying Fortitude, it costs you 15 points. Now, a Ghoul is 55.
Yeah. But we've discussed going from 8 to 12 wounds is a huge leap in survivability.
It's a big step up, yeah. Going from 8 to 10 is a big step up, but going from 8 to 12 is much more.
Yeah, because like you're against average damage fighters, it takes like 7 or 8 attacks to take you down. Yes. And then again, anyone who's going to hit you really hard, it doesn't matter if you've got those extra fill wounds or not. They generally kill you in 1, maybe 2 hits.
Yeah, and like putting Fortitude on the Harriers. So the Harriers themselves, 4 attack, strength 3, 1/3, so not massively interesting.
But again, it's speed that they have.
Speed, 10
survivability is what they need.
Yeah, 10-inch move. They go up to 12 wounds because they start with 8. They only have toughness 2, but the difference between toughness 2 and 3 is negligible. They've got Baffling Parley, which is -1 attack for anyone who tries to attack them as a reaction, which really does help to increase their survivability. So
yeah,
I guess that you could run the Harriers into a thing. They'll have their 12 wounds. You can use Baffling Parley to reduce the attacks coming in, and you could probably survive 1 or 2 extra combats just off the back of that.
Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting for a 10-inch move, basically thing that goes and sits on an objective. So, yeah, interesting. And of course, it's not lacking in damage at all because of those 2 Ferocity Vargulfs.
They will reach out and touch somebody.
Yes, and Vargulfs, as a reminder, they have the triple, which is +3 attacks. So
it's like up to 7 attacks.
7 attacks, with I think a 3/5 damage profile. So it's massive on those. And finally, we've got Benjamin, Mutilith Vortex Beast. What a hero!
The only monster was
the only monster.
It is a small monster. Is its saving grace?
No, that's not the point. It's a Mutilith specifically.
Oh yeah,
it's not worth 425 points. It is. I like the Mutilith. I think it's just weird, just crazy thing, and I love the design. I love the tentacles. I love the portal on its back. So I always like to see it. And yeah, he was playing it with these are Chaos Cultists with a Decuriarch, 2 Hornhelms, and a Mutandor. I mean, Decuriarch has a lot of damage. Hornhelms also
a lot of damage.
A good amount of damage. And a Mutilith is... to say anything about a Mutilith, it's a difficult piece to try and take off the battlefield because it does have a lot of wounds and it does put out a bit, like a chunk of damage. So you ain't going to kill it in one shot, and it can sit on objectives fairly easily. So yeah, that's what Benjamin took. Good on you for the Mutilith.
And going 3/1 with a 5 model Warband. It's technically 8 activations because you get 3 activations with the Mutilith. But it's still only actually 5 physical models on the board.
Yes.
So
you'll
to still
always
go
be
3 and 1.
outnumbered.
Yeah.
I think it was the smallest list on the day.
Probably, yeah. It's very difficult to get less than 5 models without deliberately taking the most expensive things possible. It's a very compact list, but doesn't lack damage.
That's all the 3/1 winners and the top 8. Going into the final standings, 26 players. You can see that at the top, like the top 12 players or so, all very close in the amount of points that they got, especially going from like player 9 all the way up to 3rd place. Any small change in either of those players' victory conditions can really have moved things around.
A minor win or a minor loss from a major would make a massive.
So you would have come in 3rd place, Charles, if that major loss was a minor loss.
Yes, yeah.
And similarly, if any of my 2 minor wins were major wins, that would have pushed me up to 3rd place.
A major one way or the other on one of their scores would have completely changed the standings.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at the quests completed, that's fairly interesting. So a lot of people managed to get 2 tournament quests. Very few people managed to get 3. No one got 4.
These missions didn't really favor the quest as much. 5 people who didn't actually manage to get any tournament quests.
Yeah, I mean, one of them was Demetrios.
Yeah. But he's playing a list where it's actually difficult to score most of them. I actually only scored the kill the leader one, and I chose that first game because it was against the Slanesh, and it's like, well, relatively squishy leader that I can shoot.
Yes. I mean, a lot of the quests, I think you're right in that case, a lot of the quests don't really lend themselves to the missions that we were playing.
Yeah.
Because the missions were very specific in what they wanted you to do, and there wasn't much scope outside of that to be able to do anything. So the only quests I managed to score were high ground, because my warband happens to be pretty good at doing things like that, and kill the leader whilst keeping your leader alive. Now, my leader's the guy with the dog, but everyone thinks it's Calthea Zandire, even though it's not. And the guy with the dog kind of just keeps out of the way and doesn't really do all that much. So that's really how I managed to do that. But the other ones I tried, they don't really lend themselves to the missions.
You have to put yourself in a position where you're not near the objectives.
Yes, you're not doing the mission that you need to do. Like we said at the beginning, very diverse. It's just the 2 Cruel Boys and like the 4 Soulblight Gravelords. But apart from that, everyone took something completely different. I've also got for you, for the people at home, we're not going to talk about them in any great detail, but these are the rest of the lists that we have for people who submitted. You can check those out yourself. Something I do want to say, there's a lot of savagery. The reason why there's a lot of savagery is that it's the cheapest one of the Divine Blessings that's of any real use. It only costs 10 points, and it has +1 crit. So we saw a lot of savagery here. I think 6 warbands took 1 or more points of savagery, so that was interesting to see. A lot of Fulmoroid Crushers. I say a lot. A few Fulmoroid Crushers, so that seemed to be the ally of choice, which was pretty nice. There is, again, Absolute Hero, who came 15th with the Alpha, Star Master, and 8 Huanchi's Claw.
Sounds like I left somebody else around at some point.
Well, not quite. So yeah, that was pretty cool. But yeah, these are for those people at home that you guys can check it out, and you can see where they line up with how they came in the standings. Okay, and yeah, that's it. That's it from us for today. That was how the event went. I think overall it was successful. Probably because generally I tended to play against warbands that were not well matched for what I was bringing, but evenly matched in terms of the amount of models that we were both using and our respective damage outputs. So there wasn't any real disparity in the archetypes that were being used. I think you were largely the same, Charles.
Yeah, it was only my first game where I was kind of really outnumbered. The Soulblight Gravelord was a small list as well, so play again. If I'd been against like 3-1 outnumbering, may have been a lot different.
Sure. But yeah, overall, good. It was a good event. I've already given my feedback to them about Mission 3, so that's all in there. Hopefully, in February,
just needs a bit of clarification.
Exactly. So if it comes up, we'll be clarified, and maybe I can win that one. That'd be pretty good. I would like to give a big welcome to Ammo Enthusiast and Rob, who has joined us on my Patreon. So welcome. I hope you guys are enjoying the things I'm giving you. If you like what you saw and you want more things like this, please, of course, do not forget to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comments section below what you thought about the event, what you thought about the lists, any comments you might have on the missions. If you played at the event, please let us know how you found it and any kind of feedback that you can give. That'd be great, because then we can feed that back into Games Workshop and have Warhammer World put on better events in the future. But yes, that is it from us for today. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Itan. Say goodbye, Charles.
Goodbye, Charles.
Goodbye, Charles. Goodbye from me, and I will see you next time.